Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. It's time, once again, for another depressing dose of dismal Disney. In spite of Disney's glowing report last month praising CEO Bob Iger and claiming that Disney has made money on Star Wars, Forbes is revealing the truth that Disney didn't want its shareholders to know before the proxy vote. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please subscribe to this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! Forbes released a very interesting article on April 14th that was entitled, "Disney Star Wars Box Office Profits Fail to Cover Cost of Buying Lucasfilm." But guess what? That's not what Disney told its shareholders before the proxy vote earlier this month. Imagine that! Would Disney lie to its shareholders? I'll let you decide. Box office profits generated by Disney's Star Wars movies have fallen $2.8 billion short of covering the media giant's purchase of the sci-fi saga's creator, Lucasfilm, according to analysis of recently filed financial statements. And as I will show, Disney is short by more than that as far as the movies are concerned. Disney bought Lucasfilm and the Star Wars franchise for $4.05 billion in 2012 and soon gave the green light to a new trilogy of Star Wars movies, which teamed up rising stars Daisy Ridley and John Boyega with Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and the late Carrie Fisher, who headlined the original movies more than 30 years earlier. All the stars aligned when The Force Awakens, the first film in the new series, was released in 2015. According to industry analyst Box Office Mojo, it grossed a staggering $2.1 billion, causing Disney to commission 2 spin-off movies as well as 2 sequels that were already planned. Actually, there were 3 spin-off movies planned until one of them flopped at the box office. However, as the series continued, there was a disturbance in the Force due to an over-reliance on computer-generated effects and a lack of the gritty, quirky characters who made the original series smash hits. Well, that's an oversimplification that fails to take into account Kathleen Kennedy co-opting the Star Wars franchise to push her radical feminist ideology, to include retconning the achievements of Luke Skywalker and his father Anakin by resurrecting Emperor Palpatine in Jar Jar Abrams' dumpster fire of a movie, Star Wars 9: The Rise of Palpatine. And I have something very interesting to reveal about that movie in particular later in this video. The article then talks about The Mandalorian as well as the Book of Boba Fett, which I will skip and pick up again where it resumes talking about the movies. The declining interest in Disney's initial trilogy of movies seems like a distant memory, and the mouse has made the most of it. Last month, Disney released a 67-page presentation singing the praises of its chief executive Bob Iger in a bid to convince shareholders to side with him in a battle with activist investors. And I really hate that terminology, activist investors, because a more accurate description would be very concerned investors. One of its key boasts was about the supposedly spellbinding return on investment generated by franchises that Disney acquired under Iger. But I do very much like the use of the term spellbinding. The presentation gives the impression that Disney's Star Wars trilogy generated a 2.9 times return on the purchase of Lucasfilm, as that figure is presented next to a timeline of key events in the production company's history. They include the release of the Disney movies and its acquisition of Lucasfilm, which is the only milestone marked with a star. Adding to this impression is the fact that at the other end of the timeline is the Star Wars logo and a photo of the Mandalorian with his little green friend. And here's where you want to pay very close attention to what's written in this Forbes article. However, buried in the fine print is the revelation that the purchase price of Lucasfilm isn't even included in the ROI calculation. I don't know about you, but I'm beginning to smell a rat, methinks. Instead, it is purely based on the box office performance of Disney's Star Wars trilogy, its 2 spin-off movies, merchandise, DVD, and Blu-ray sales. Egads, you mean it doesn't include the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel that Disney permanently closed last September? As revealed, the methodology is questionable, as Disney based the ROI on the revenue generated by the movies, merchandise, DVDs, and Blu-rays, rather than the profit they made as it should have done. You mean to tell me that Disney wanted to make their financials from Star Wars appear much rosier than they actually are? Using the revenue rather than the profit artificially inflates the results, as it doesn't factor in the costs that Disney had to pay out. In other words, Disney deliberately presented information that wasn't an actual ROI to mislead shareholders to gain their unwavering support. And remember, this is coming from Forbes. You won't find information like this coming from Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, or the shill media. Even this wasn't enough for the media giant, so it also forecast the revenue that it expected the Star Wars movies, merchandise, DVDs, and Blu-rays to generate over a 10-year period, and based the calculation on that too. In other words, Disney hasn't actually received the revenue that it used to calculate the return on its investment. So let's make sure that we all understand what Disney has done here. Not only is Disney using a fraudulent methodology to calculate an ROI for Star Wars that fails to take its costs into account, it's also using non-existent revenue to make its gross revenue numbers appear even better than they actually are. And they very likely did that because their actual revenue from the Star Wars franchise is probably very low. So this is beyond creative accounting, and I think that the SEC should investigate what Disney is doing. In summary, despite seeming to do so, Disney's presentation doesn't actually reveal whether its Star Wars movies have covered the cost of its purchase of LucasFilm, and there may be good reasons for this. Trust me, there are. Analysis of more than 800 pages of company filings has revealed that the cost of making Disney's 5 Star Wars movies hit a total of $2.1 billion, peaking at $567.3 million on The Force Awakens. However, that's just the start. Mindful of this blockbuster budget, Disney devised an ingenious way to make money back on the movie, which was to film it at Pinewood Studios in the United Kingdom. This enabled Disney to benefit from the UK government's audiovisual expenditure credit, which gives studios a cash reimbursement of up to 25.5% of the money they spend in the UK, provided that it represents at least 10% of the film's total costs. And I talked about this in the video that I had released on April 5th, which was based on a Forbes article that focused on how much money Disney had lost on Lucasfilm's 2023 disaster of a movie, Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction. In fact, this Forbes article was written by the same lady as the Indiana Jones article. Movie budgets are usually a closely guarded secret, as studios tend to absorb the cost of individual pictures in their overall expenses and don't itemize how much they spent on each one. However, the costs of movies made in the UK are consolidated in single companies, which file annual financial statements showing the cash reimbursement, headcount, salaries, total expenses, and more, and they usually have code names so that they don't raise attention when filing for permits to shoot off-site. The Disney subsidiary behind The Force Awakens is named Foodles Production, after the cafe next to the San Rafael, California headquarters of Kerner Optical, the original practical effects division of Lucasfilm's Industrial Light and Magic VFX film. A condition of receiving the cash reimbursement is that the companies must be responsible for everything from pre-production to delivery of the movie and paying for services related to the finished film. It is one of the reasons why Foodles is still booking costs on its financial statements more than 8 years after The Force Awakens was released. And I agree that sounds rather ridiculous, but Companies often file their financial statements around a year after the period they cover. This is why the latest results for Foodles were filed in December 2023 and are for the year ending on December 31st, 2022. During that period, the company spent $3.5 million, bringing the total budget for The Force Awakens to a massive $567.3 million. Salaries alone came to a total of $22.7 million, with staff numbers peaking at 258 without even including freelancers and self-employed workers who make up the majority of the crew. Then comes the cash reimbursement, which was a whopping $92.2 million, bringing the movie's net costs down to $475.1 million. So the total production budget for The Force Awakens was a whopping $576.3 million, but thanks to the UK government's reimbursements, the production cost went down to $475.1 million, which is still massive in of itself. And I want to point out that that is only the production cost and does not include costs for marketing or other miscellaneous costs, as I typically estimate in my videos, and I will be doing that here as well. Unsurprisingly, the second biggest budget was for Jar Jar Abrams' 2019 dumpster fire of a movie, The Rise of Palpatine, which cost $542.4 million to make. At the other end of the spectrum are the two Star Wars spin-offs which were also made in the UK, Rogue One and Solo. Several of the Star Wars Disney Plus streaming series were also made in the UK, so their costs are known, but unlike the movies, their profit cannot be calculated. Streaming totally obfuscates the profitability of any shows or movies, because Disney Plus subscribers pay a single fee which grants them access to all of its content, making it impossible to determine how much subscription revenue is generated for specific shows. Theater chains typically get around half of the takings, with the remainder going to the studios. Deducting the $475.1 million net cost of The Force Awakens from Disney's share of the box office leaves a blockbuster profit of around $559.6 million. But that value doesn't actually take the costs of marketing or other miscellaneous costs into account, which is what this same Forbes author did in the article about Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction. I'm guessing that Forbes probably didn't want any speculative data being used, but not including those costs makes everything look rosier for Disney than it actually is. However, the article does include a very good chart that clearly shows the production costs for each of Disney's 5 Star Wars movies, plus the revenue that Disney got, which is 50% of the gross box office ticket sales, as I always stress in my videos, as well as the assumed profit or loss for each of the 5 films that excludes the marketing and miscellaneous costs. And I have reconstructed that chart here, but what would this look like with the marketing and other miscellaneous costs taken into account? Disney spent a lot of money to market each of these blockbuster movies, and since it isn't uncommon for studios to spend as much as an additional 50% of the production budget on marketing for blockbusters, that's the value that I am going to assume here. Now, something else that Forbes didn't take into account is Disney's earnings via DVD and Blu-ray sales, which I do have for each of their 5 Star Wars movies. So I will include that as part of Disney's revenue in an effort to be as accurate as possible for Disney's profits or losses on their 5 Star Wars movies. And when we take marketing costs, miscellaneous costs, and revenue from DVD and Blu-ray sales into account, Solo: A Star Wars Story isn't the only Star Wars movie that flopped. So did Jar Jar Abrams' dumpster fire of a movie, Star Wars 9: The Rise of Palpatine. And when you think about it, it makes total sense, because even with Forbes' own numbers, the most that The Rise of Palpatine could have earned without taking marketing costs, miscellaneous costs, and revenue from DVD and Blu-ray sales into account is just over $88 million. And I really don't think that Disney's marketing budget alone on The Rise of Palpatine was less than $88 million. So using Forbes data, the total amount of money that Disney and Lucasfilm made on the 5 Star Wars movies is around $1.18 billion, but when the marketing costs, miscellaneous costs, and revenue from DVD and Blu-ray sales are taken into account, then the most that Disney and Lucasfilm made on these movies is closer to $798.3 million, which is $382.6 million below what Forbes is claiming. And when you consider the fact that Disney spent $4.05 billion to purchase Lucasfilm and the Star Wars franchise from George Lucas in late 2012, then its return on investment, or ROI, is around negative 81%, which isn't even taking the losses for the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser Hotel into account, or the 6 streaming shows on Disney+. In fact, when you add all of the known production costs for all of Lucasfilm's Star Wars streaming shows together, you get a combined total streaming show production cost of $873.8 million, which is greater than the estimated $798.3 million in profit that Disney earned from their 5 Star Wars movies. And that fact alone brings the profitability of Star Wars for Disney and Lucasfilm into serious doubt. If anything, they have only lost money on everything because, again, that doesn't include the costs for the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel or the cost of constructing the Galaxy's Edge lands in its US Disney theme parks. Is it any wonder then why Disney used fictitious revenue data for Star Wars to make everything sound rosy in that presentation that they released before the shareholder proxy vote was taken? Now, I don't know about those of you who are watching this video, but I would have to say that an at least negative 81% return on investment on Star Wars alone isn't a healthy position for a company to be in. But Disney's lies and double talk convinced its shareholders to vote for Bob Iger and the rest of its existing board of directors in the proxy vote to lead it into greater financial losses for the future. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.